We're back in Leading Edge. He is State Senator Rob McColley, Republican out of Napoleon. He's the guy that sponsors Senate Bill 258. Do I have that one right, Rob? That
Right.
See, when we redo our congressional districts in Ohio, we do the congressional by law, so it has to be a bill, and he sponsored the bill passed this week down in Columbus. Failing to garner any Democratic support for the maps will stand now for 4 years, these maps. A truly bipartisan effort would have resulted in 10-year maps. The same happened over with the new state legislative districts when they were drawn. That mess ends up in court. Will yours too? And maybe shouldn't it, since it was anything but bipartisan? Maybe the judicial branch should weigh in, since, like Washington, our legislative branch on this issue appears dysfunctional.
So I think there's a decent probability that it ends up in court. This is the first time this constitutional amendment will be subject to interpretation. And so I think part of that might be the reason that it ends up in court is people want to see how the court's going to come down with their precedent. But I feel fully confident we complied with the Constitution. I think when you compare this map, especially to maps that have been passed in the past, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, et cetera, we don't split governmental units the same way that we did in previous maps. We have less splits of counties in this map than any of the Democrat maps had splits of counties.
I think there are some concerns too about the process that I think a lot of people wanted. I mean, 75% of the people voted to amend the state constitution in 2018. When we hear that this map came into being on Monday evening, was really drawn Monday evening, and then set for a vote on Tuesday, and the other side says, well, there's not even a chance to chat here. Or on the state legislative districts, it's now coming out, Rob, that our statewide office holders, DeWine and Faber and LaRose, now saying, well, they were pretty much out of the ongoing discussion. It was the legislative people. It was Kopp. It was Huffman. And it just doesn't seem like it reflects the will of what I thought people were saying in 2018 in terms of openness and transparency.
Well, I would disagree with that. There were countless hours of testimony on any of these bills and any of these maps and any of the concepts contained therein. And so even looking at the map that we ended up passing, there are a lot of concepts that were included as a result of the public input. One of them being keeping Lucas County whole, keeping Stark County whole, putting Dayton with the Springfield, city of Springfield, among other things. And so there were many aspects that were included as a result of that public input, while of course, as I mentioned before, ensuring that we keep a plurality of the districts competitive.
Yeah, and I was up here, so you know, in case you got the word down there, I was up here railing about what they were doing to Toledo, and you guys did keep Toledo and Lucas County whole. While I have you, lawmakers continue to push a couple of measures that would in effect tell teachers what to teach and how when it comes to the issue of race and its effects on our nation's history, which it has had huge effects and continues to. This seems like an incredible overreach by lawmakers, largely reacting to boogeyman stories about teaching that nobody can find actually going on in our schools. So when my grandkids go to history class, will we have effectively erased slavery from our history books? I mean, is that the goal? What are we doing here?
No, I wouldn't say we've effectively erased slavery. It's a sad chapter in our history.
Yes.
It needs to be taught objectively. But what we shouldn't be teaching in the meantime is that white people are guilty for one reason or another for the sins committed 200 years ago.
Are we teaching that? Where's that being taught?
Well, it may not be taught expressly, but there are examples across the state of Ohio where there are instances of it being injected into our curriculum in one way or another. The thought of the racial dynamics between all people of all different colors and how that they need to be remedied in some fashion. It's not necessarily something that is out in front, but you have to look at the subtleties of some of what's happening across Ohio. And it's not in every district, but it is something that's happening across the country. And in many cases, what we've seen is it goes from the coast in some cases and then works its way inward. And so if we don't take action, there is going to be, in some fashion, that incorporation into the curriculum. I think if you look at what's happening even at the national level, where the National Teachers Union, the NEA, actually came out and said, oh, well, we're not teaching this. And then they came out later on and endorsed a resolution saying that they were essentially endorsing the teaching of that curriculum. That should be a warning sign to people that we need to take action now. And I would agree that the state, I would rather disagree that the state And the state legislature does have a vested interest in making sure that what's being taught in our public schools lines up with what the policy of the state is, with a neutral, objective curriculum.
Are we going to let people buy and carry concealed weapons with no registration and no required training whatsoever? I mean, I just have a lot of my cop friends up here in Northwest Ohio who aren't too big on that.
Yeah, and I understand that, but at the same time, one thing that needs to be made clear is that Ohio law. If you and I were to take off our jackets right now and we had a gun on our hip in a holster, you and I could walk around in public all we wanted to under Ohio law currently. There's nothing stopping us from doing that, whether we're registered or not. The difference with this concealed, what they should be calling permitless concealed carry, as opposed to constitutional carry as it's been branded, but permitless concealed carry essentially means that. It means that you're going to be able to wear that jacket, or you're going to be able to have it concealed in some fashion, as opposed to having to carry it openly. And so that's the only major difference. That's what's happening with that piece of legislation.
There's other stuff to get to, and my clock is moving too fast. I want to thank State Senator Rob McColley, Republican Napoleon, for keeping us on the leading edge of redrawing congressional districts. To you and your family, have a great holiday season, Rob.
Thank you. You too, Jerry.
Thank you. When I come back, he says he's been changing young lives in Toledo for 15 years more, and he thinks that what he's doing could save lives in Toledo. He joins us next right here on Leading Edge.